Last week I drove past a dealership just outside town, and I counted them. Row after row of brand new cars, plates still clean, tires still shining, sitting exactly where they sat the month before. Nobody was buying them, and I used to think that was impossible. Here is what I learned the hard way. Some of the newest, shiniest cars on sale in Britain right now are quietly rotting on forecourts, losing thousands in value every single month, and the people who understand why are buying them for a fraction of the sticker price. I stumbled onto this by accident, walking one of those lots as a nosy skeptic, and what a salesman let slip changed how I see the whole game. Stick with me, because near the end I am going to show you a registration trick buried in the way British dealers hit their targets, the kind of thing the Society of Motor Manufacturers and Traders has been publishing quietly since 1902, and it can knock genuine thousands off one of these unwanted cars this very weekend. You do not need to be rich. You do not need a trade license. You just need to know which cars nobody wants and why. Let me start with the one that shocked me first. I always believed a car from a legendary badge would sell itself. Then I saw the Maserati Ghibli sitting on a lot with dust on the bonnet. This is a car that once cost the wrong side of £70,000 new, wearing the trident, the badge that used to mean something in every school playground. But here is what happened when I looked closer. The interior tech felt years behind a car costing half as much. The engine underneath was shared with more ordinary machinery, and the running costs frightened everyone who asked. Maserati itself confirmed the Ghibli was ending production, and in Britain, the used values fell off a cliff. I spoke to one independent dealer who told me he took a 3-year-old example in part exchange and it had lost more than 60% of its value. 60%. That is not a car. That is a slow fire made of money. And the strange part is that the badge is exactly why people avoid it now, because everyone knows what it costs to keep one running. But if a badge can collapse like that, I wondered how much worse it got with cars built for a future that never arrived. That question led me straight to the Toyota Mirai, and this one genuinely stopped me in my tracks. It is a beautifully built saloon, smooth, quiet, well made in the way Toyota does everything. It runs on hydrogen, and that single fact is why it is one of the hardest cars to shift in the entire country. Here is the problem I did not understand until I tried to picture owning one. To fill it, you need a hydrogen station, and across the whole of the United Kingdom, there is barely a handful of public ones left, with several having closed. Imagine buying a car and discovering the nearest place to fuel it is 100 miles away, if it is even open that day. Toyota priced the Mirai around £50,000 when new, and yet 3- and 4-year-old examples have been advertised for less than $20,000 because almost nobody can realistically live with one. I sat in one on a forecourt and the salesman admitted, quietly, that it had been there for the better part of a year. A year. A brilliant car, defeated entirely by the country it was sold in. And that got me thinking about electric cars that promised the future but forgot one basic thing. Which brings me to the car that made me actually laugh out loud when I read the specification, the Mazda MX-30. Now I like Mazda. They build honest, good-looking cars. But somebody in a boardroom made a decision here that I still cannot explain. They gave this electric car a battery so small that its official range sits at around 124 miles, and in real winter driving people were reporting far less. In an age where buyers were nervous about range in the first place, Mazda released an electric car with less range than rivals from years earlier. I test drove the idea in my head. A cold morning, the heater on, the motorway, and that little battery draining like a bath with the plug pulled. It is why these cars sat unsold, why the discounts became enormous, and why you now see nearly new ones for a fraction of the roughly £30,000 they once asked. The engineering underneath is actually lovely. The doors open in that clever rear-hinged way, but nobody wanted to gamble their week on 100 miles. Therefore, the deeper I dug, the more I realized range was not even the biggest reason a new car gets abandoned. Sometimes it is something far more human: pride. Take the Genesis range. You have probably never heard of Genesis. And that is exactly the problem. Genesis is the luxury arm of Hyundai, and by every objective measure the cars are superb. Long warranties, beautiful cabins, genuinely clever technology. They arrived in Britain around 2021, full of confidence. And here is what I did not expect. They have struggled badly, because when someone spends 50 or 60,000 pounds on a luxury car, a huge part of what they are buying is what the neighbors think when it rolls onto the drive. Nobody at the golf club knows what a Genesis is. So the cars pile up, the discounts grow, and a car that should embarrass a German rival sits ignored. I find that genuinely maddening, because it means the badge snobbery we all pretend we are above is costing ordinary buyers the chance at a bargain, while punishing a car that did nothing wrong. But if snobbery kills the unknown badge, what happens to a famous badge that throws its own history away? That is the Jaguar story, and honestly it is the one that upset me most. Jaguar spent decades building an identity, the leaping cat, the growl, the sense of British craft. Then the brand tore almost all of it up, paused most of its lineup, and pushed toward a completely reinvented future with a shocking new image that split opinion down the middle. In the middle of all that, the traditional Jaguars, the saloons and the familiar shapes became orphans on the forecourt. Buyers did not know if the brand still stood for what they loved, and uncertainty is poison to a car sale. I watched values wobble on models that were mechanically perfectly good cars. A dealer told me people would walk up, admire one, then ask what Jaguar even is now, and walk away without an answer. When a company confuses its own most loyal customers, the cars stop moving. Therefore, I started to notice a pattern, a whole family of cars from a certain place suffering the exact same disease. French cars. I have a soft spot for them, so this one hurt. The Citroen C5X and especially the DS models, the DS9 in particular, are some of the most comfortable, most interesting cars you can buy. DS is meant to be the posh French luxury brand, all quilted leather and clever design, and in Britain the sales numbers have been quietly catastrophic. I looked into why, and it comes down to two brutal facts. First, the same badge snobbery, because nobody in Britain thinks of DS as a rival to the German luxury names. Second, and this is the killer, the fear of what a complex French car costs to repair once the warranty ends. That reputation, fair or not, follows these cars around like a shadow. So the DS9, a car that could cost north of £40,000 new, tumbles in value faster than almost anything, and the lots fill up with unloved examples. I actually sat in a DS9, and it was one of the nicest cabins I have ever experienced under £50,000. And it did not matter one bit, which taught me the hardest lesson so far. A great car is not the same thing as a car people will buy, and nowhere is that clearer than with the little electric city cars that were supposed to change everything. The Honda E is the perfect example, and it genuinely breaks my heart. It is possibly the most charming small car of the last decade. Screens across the whole dashboard, cameras instead of mirrors, a face like something from a friendly cartoon. Everyone who saw it loved it. Almost nobody bought it. Here is the trap Honda fell into. They priced this tiny city car at around £37,000, more than far larger and more practical electric cars, and they gave it a real-world range that struggled to reach 130 miles. So you had the most adorable car in the showroom, wearing a price tag that made no sense, doing a job a cheaper car did better. Honda quietly pulled the plug on it. And now those cars sit as unwanted new old stock and rapidly depreciating used examples, a masterpiece of design killed by a spreadsheet. I keep coming back to this idea that the cleverness of a car means nothing if the maths insults the buyer. But there is one type of car where the maths is not the problem at all. The problem is fear of the unknown. I am talking about the wave of Chinese cars arriving in Britain right now, and I need to be careful and fair here. The GWM Aura, the models from BYD, cars from brands most British buyers had never heard of 2 years ago. Some of these are genuinely well built and packed with equipment. But here is what happens on the forecourt. A cautious British buyer, spending their hard-earned money, sees a badge they do not recognize and immediately worries. Will the company still be here in 5 years? What will it be worth when I sell it? Where do I get it fixed? Those questions, unanswered, freeze the sale. So these brand new cars, some of them impressively good value, sit and wait while buyers drift back to the names they know. The residual values, the amount the car is worth later, have in some cases been brutal, and I watch dealers slashing prices just to get them off the books. And that fear of the unknown resale value is the exact thread that ties into the next group, the electric cars that got left behind by their own technology. Now here is where I want to talk directly to you, because up to now you might be thinking this is all about expensive cars for other people, luxury saloons and 40,000-pound toys that have nothing to do with your life. I thought the same thing when I started poking around these lots. But this next part is exactly for the person watching who does not have big money to throw around, who just wants a decent car without being robbed. Because the single biggest group of unwanted new cars in Britain is not the flashy stuff. It is ordinary, affordable, older technology electric cars, and understanding this can save you a genuine fortune. Here is what I mean. When a car maker releases a new electric model, the previous one does not vanish. Dealers are often still holding brand new, unregistered examples of the older version. The Nissan Leaf in its earlier form, the first Renault Zoe stock, early versions of small electric cars from several brands, these get stranded the moment a newer, longer-range model appears in the brochure, and nobody wants the old one at full price when the new one exists. So these cars sit. They are brand new. They have never turned a wheel on the road, and the dealer is quietly desperate to move them, because every day they sit is money lost and space wasted. I found examples where the discount off an old but genuinely new electric car was staggering, because the dealer simply needed it gone before the next quarter. And this is the part that matters for your wallet. For most ordinary drivers, the difference between 140 miles of range and 200 miles of range does not actually change your daily life, because the average British car journey is only a few miles. Most people drive to work, to the shops, to see family, and home again. If you almost never do a 300-mile day, that older, cheaper, unwanted electric car is not a compromise at all. It is a bargain that everyone else is too nervous or too proud to take. I ran the numbers on a friend's daily driving, and the car everyone was avoiding would have covered her entire week 3 times over on a single charge. She just did not know she was allowed to want the unwanted car. You are allowed. In fact, the unwanted car is often the smartest buy on the entire forecourt, and I am about to show you the exact mechanism that makes it cheapest of all. Before I show you the exact mechanism that makes these unwanted cars the cheapest of all, let me stop for one honest minute, because knowing which cars nobody wants is only half the battle. You are standing on that dusty back row, the one nobody photographs, staring at a plate that is a few months old, with almost no miles behind it, and a voice in your head is asking whether you are about to make a 10,000-pound mistake. That exact feeling is why I put everything I know into a plain digital book called The Complete Dead Metal System. It is the full version of what this video only touches, all 3 volumes in order, from the first fixes that stop the bleeding before your next decision costs you, to the 12-month action roadmap, with decision templates built for these 2026 UK conditions, so you know exactly what to sell, hold, exit, and avoid. It walks you through which brands are running out of road and dragging values down with them, and the engine failure scandal your dealer will never mention. And here is something you can check for yourself tonight, for free, before you spend a penny with me. Take one of those unwanted models we talked about, the Mazda with the tiny battery or the little Honda, and search it on any listing site, then compare a 3-year-old price against what it cost new. Watch that gap with your own eyes. That is the collapse this book teaches you to turn in your favor. The fastest way to get the books is to scan the QR code right there on your screen, or go to the link in the description, or the pinned comment. And this matters right now no matter when you are watching, because the next plate change is always coming, and the pressure on dealers only builds until it does. In a moment, I am going to explain exactly how a car gets counted as sold in this country, and the completely legal registration trick that turns a desperate dealer into your best bargain. All right, back to the forecourt, because there is something happening behind the scenes at British dealerships that almost nobody outside the trade fully understands, and once I understood it, I could not unsee it. This is the piece I promised you at the start, and it is the reason so many of these cars end up as bargains rather than simply staying expensive and unsold forever. Let me explain how a car actually gets counted as sold in this country. The Society of Motor Manufacturers and Traders, an organization that has been recording British vehicle registrations since 1902, publishes figures every single month showing how many new cars were registered. Those figures are enormous news inside the industry. Manufacturers set their dealers hard targets, and the dealers must hit them or lose bonuses worth serious money. Now here is the trick, and it is completely legal. When a dealer is short of their target near the end of a quarter, especially before the big plate changes in March and September, they register cars to themselves. The car gets a number plate. On paper it is sold. In reality it is sitting on the lot with almost no miles on it. Now technically a used car, even though nobody has ever owned it. These are called pre-registered cars, or self-registered cars, and this is where your bargain lives. Because that car, brand new in every way that matters, with maybe 5 or 10 delivery miles on the clock, can no longer be sold as new, so it must be sold at a discount, often a large one, and the loss is something the dealer already accepted when they chose to hit their target. I learned to walk onto a forecourt and ask one specific question: do you have any pre-registered examples of this model? And the answer, especially on these unwanted cars we have been talking about, is very often yes. The Mazda with the tiny battery, the French luxury saloon, the electric city car, the unknown badge, these are exactly the cars most likely to be self-registered, because they are the cars the dealer struggled to sell the honest way in the first place. So the very same qualities that make a car unwanted, the odd range, the unfamiliar badge, the collapsing resale value, are the qualities that push the dealer to pre-register it, which is precisely what creates the deepest discount for you. The unwanted car and the cheapest car are, over and over again, the same car, and the timing is not random. The last week of March and the last week of September, right before the new plates arrive, are when this pressure peaks, and when those pre-registered bargains flood the forecourts. That is your window. That is the buried rhythm the trade has been living by for over a century, hidden in plain sight in registration figures anybody can read. And there is one more layer of protection I want you to hold on to, because buying a rejected, unloved car makes some people nervous. Under the Consumer Rights Act that came into force in October 2015, if you buy a car from a proper dealer and it turns out to be faulty, you have a short window, 30 days, to reject it and get your money back, and further rights beyond that. So the fear that keeps everyone else away from these cars, the fear of something going wrong, is far smaller than they imagine when you buy properly from a dealer. Everyone else sees a risky, unwanted car. You now see a nearly new car, protected by law, sold at a self-registered discount, that does everything your ordinary life actually needs. That is the whole secret, and it took me walking those dusty forecourts and asking annoying questions to finally see it. Let me bring back the ones we have not fully touched, because the pattern completes the picture. The Fiat 500 electric and the little Abarth version, charming beyond words, hampered by price and range in exactly the way the Honda was, and therefore exactly the kind of car that ends up pre-registered and discounted. The Lexus and Infiniti-style luxury from brands that never quite convinced the badge-conscious British buyer, sitting quietly, waiting. The Alfa Romeo models carrying that eternal whisper of worry about reliability, fair or not, dragging their resale value down, and pushing dealers to self-register them near quarter end. The smart electric cars, tiny and clever, and priced against far bigger rivals. Every single one of them follows the same journey. Built with pride, priced with optimism, rejected by a cautious public, registered by a desperate dealer, and finally, quietly, sold cheap to the one buyer who understood the game. I want you to notice what actually killed these cars, because it was almost never the car itself. The Mirai was defeated by a country with no hydrogen stations. The Genesis was defeated by neighbors who had never heard of it. The Jaguar was defeated by a company confusing its own faithful. The Chinese newcomers were defeated by fear of a future nobody could promise. The Mazda and the Honda were defeated by a spreadsheet that priced them wrong. In almost every case, the metal, the engineering, the thing you actually drive was perfectly good and sometimes genuinely excellent. What failed was the story around the car, and a failed story is the cheapest thing in the world to buy if you do not care about the story and only care about the car. That realization changed how I look at every forecourt now. I used to see the shiny new arrivals near the road, the ones with the balloons and the special offer stickers, and I thought that was where the deals lived. Now I walk past all of that. I head for the back of the lot, the row nobody photographs, the cars with a thin layer of pollen on the bonnet and a plate that is a few months old with almost no miles behind it. That back row is where a dealer keeps his mistakes, and his mistakes are your opportunity. I found a car back there once that had been registered 7 months earlier with fewer than 15 miles on it, marked down by an amount that genuinely made me ask him to repeat the figure. Brand new in all but paperwork. Unwanted by everyone who valued the badge over the machine. So here is what I want you to carry away from all of this. The cars rotting on British dealer lots are not rotting because they are bad. They are rotting because we, as buyers, have been trained to fear the unfamiliar, to worship the badge, and to pay full price for the story rather than the substance. And every day one of those cars sits unsold, the pressure builds inside the dealership until the plate change comes and the discounts crack open like ice in spring. Somebody preserved that knowledge, quietly, inside the trade, for more than 100 years of registration figures. Now you have it too. If you take one thing from me, let it be this. The most despised car on the forecourt and the best value car on the forecourt are almost always sitting in the same parking space. You just have to be the one person brave enough and now informed enough to walk over to it. The people who buy the popular car pay for everyone else's confidence. The people who buy the unwanted car keep the money in their own pocket. I know which one I am now, and I promise you it took losing money the old way to finally learn it. You are the kind of person who suspects that the smart move is usually the one the crowd is too proud or too nervous to make, and today you just proved yourself right. This was never about cars nobody wants. It was about the quiet gap between what something is worth and what people are afraid to buy, and standing in that gap with your eyes open. Now I want to hear from you, and I mean this specifically. Out of everything we covered, which one shocked you most? The hydrogen car stranded with nowhere to fill up, the adorable Honda killed by its own price tag, or the pre-registration trick that turns the last week of March into a hunting ground? Tell me in the comments, and tell me where you are watching from, because I genuinely want to know which of these cars are sitting on the lots near you right now. If you have ever bought one of these unloved cars, or walked away from one and regret it, put that down too. And if part of you believes, like I do, that a lot of what we are told to want is really just someone else protecting their own profit, then come along with the rest of us who are learning to see through it. Next time I am going to show you the exact 3 questions I ask a salesman before I even look at a price. Questions that make it almost impossible for them to hide the real deal from you. One of them, they never expect, and it changes the whole conversation in about 10 seconds. I will see you there. Now this video showed you why these cars sit unwanted, but I couldn't fit everything here. Inside the old ways society, I pick up right where I just stopped. And if you get stuck, you can ask me your own question and I answer you myself. A real person, not a machine. You'd belong with thousands of old ways folks just like you. Just point your phone at the code, and you can cancel anytime, no risk.